Coming up on Arirang News. The 2030 World Expo will be held in Saudi Arabia's Riyadh as it won the most votes. Busan lost the bid this time, but the city might try to host the World Expo in 2035. U.S. Department of Defense says there are plenty of images of the White House and the Pentagon online, doubting North Korea's claim that its military spy satellite photographed key U.S. government and military facilities. The OECD expects a slowdown in growth for the global economy, predicting it to ease to 2.7% in 2024 from 2.9% this year. But it says South Korea's economy is likely to expand by 2.3% next year, an upward revision led by recovery in the country's exports and China's economy. Good evening, it's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We start with the vote in Paris. Saudi Arabia's Riyadh won the hosting victory of the 2030 World Expo, defeating Busan and Rome. Despite losing the bid this time, Busan might try to host the World Expo in 2035. Kim Jung-sil has our top story.
Saudi Arabia's capital city Riyadh will host the 2030 World Expo. Riyadh won 119 votes in the first round of voting against Busan's 29 votes and 17 votes for Rome. With the Saudi capital claiming more than two-thirds of the votes from the 165 participating countries, the host was decided without the need for a runoff vote. The South Korean government solemnly accepted the result in the crushing defeat.
I sincerely apologize for not being able to return the support people have given us, and I feel a heavy sense of responsibility.
The Prime Minister added he will further develop the diplomatic assets gained from visiting more than 180 countries as part of the campaign to host a global mega event in South Korea's second-largest city of Busan. Representatives from the southern city were disappointed at the result, but said the city would actively consider making a bid for the World Expo event in 2035. Pundits had said Busan's bid was already a long shot, considering Riyadh had begun a substantial marketing campaign a year ahead of South Korea, with Busan only joining the campaign in the summer of last year. Experts from Busan's campaign said the astronomical amount of capital available to Saudi enabled its delegation to offer direct and immediate aid solutions to voter countries, which might have helped the result. Even though South Korea tasted the bitterness of defeat, experts added the 17-month-long international bidding process would give know-how and create opportunities for future market development. The World Expo can take place for up to 6 months and has a legacy of creating economic benefits and jobs, with tens of millions of visitors from all around the world attending. The most recent World Expo took place in Dubai between October 2021 and March 2022. The next World Expo will take place in Osaka in 2025. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
The challenge ends this time, but South Korea's efforts continue for balanced growth across the country and sustainable development around the world. Now that's according to President Yoon Suk-yeol, having expressed his regrets over Busan losing the Expo bid. Our Oh Soo-young breaks down his public address made in a rare press briefing earlier today.
Busan won't be holding the World Expo in 2030, but its vision for South Korea and the world continues to live on. That's according to President Yoon Suk-yeol in a press briefing on Wednesday, the morning after Riyadh won the bid to host the Mega Expo in 2030. Addressing the nation, the president said despite Busan losing, his government will continue to pursue balanced regional growth and sustainable global development. He lauded the strenuous united efforts made by governments, diplomatic missions and private companies like SK's Samsung, LG and Hyundai over the past year and a half, and regretted that the chances of securing the bid had been miscalculated. The failure, he said, was down to its insufficient leadership.
엑스포 유치를 총 지휘하고 책임을 진 대통령으로서 우리 부산 시민을 비롯한 우리 국민 여러분께 실망시켜드린 것에 대해서 정말 죄송하다는 말씀을.
He noted that he'd held over 150 meetings with some 96 heads of state and dozens of phone calls as part of his personal outreach, having observed early efforts in Busan to prepare for the Expo campaign without sufficient support, and pledged to do his utmost even as a presidential candidate to help secure the bid. Still, Yoon said, the purpose of holding the Expo was not only to develop Busan, but to promote balanced regional development across the nation, particularly in the southeastern Yeongnam region and the southwestern Honam region, which includes cities like Gwangju, Busan and Daegu.
부산을 해양과 국제금융과 첨단산업 디지털의 거점으로서 계속 육성을 하고 우리 영호남의 남부 지역이 유기적으로 연결해서 굳이 서울까지 오지 않더라도 남부 지역에서 부산 거점으로서 모든 경제 산업 활동이 원활하게 이루어질 수 있도록 인프라 구축을 차질 없이 해 나가겠습니다.
He added that South Korea will also maintain Busan's vision of promoting sharing and solidarity, with no change to its foreign policy stance of contributing to global development, having received the support of the international community after the 1950-53 Korean War. The president further congratulated Saudi Arabia for winning the bid, calling it a key partner country to South Korea, and pledged to provide sufficient support to hold a successful World Expo in 2030. 우수영 Arirang News.
The global popularity of Korea's music, movies, and drama is ever more growing. To discuss the story behind Hallyu, or the Korean wave, and its impact on the nation and the world, our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji met with the ambassador for cultural cooperation.
What began with major hits by Korean artists including Psy's 2012 song Gangnam Style and BTS becoming the biggest boy band in the world, the Korean wave, or Hallyu, has undoubtedly taken the world by storm. The country's entertainment industry broke records not only in music but also in film, with the movie Parasite in 2019, then the Netflix show Squid Game in 2021. Netflix even announced earlier this year that it'll invest $2.5 billion in South Korea over the next 4 years to produce Korean TV series and movies. South Korea's ambassador for cultural cooperation explains the real strength of this comes from the Korean people and its history, as well as the country's early adoption of technology.
The history that they went through, the cultural adaptations they made, and the way that they were able to express themselves through song and dance. And I think that with a combination of IT and the YouTube and social media and the connection with their fans overseas has really sort of allowed the Korean wave to be so strong.
As for its impact, she says South Korea has definitely, to a certain extent, been able to gain soft power, or the ability to be able to influence others through attraction rather than coercion or force.
But it's very difficult to measure soft power because it is a soft power. It's not in a matter of dollar signs or the amount of tanks or military, artillery that you have. So it is a difficult power to measure. It is difficult to know how much of an effect it had. But I do think that Korea has soft power.
The Yoon administration has been seeking to expand South Korea's global presence with the concept of a global pivotal state as its foreign policy vision, highlighting its commitment to play a more active role in tackling regional and global challenges. Son says this idea of fulfilling its role in the global community will allow Korean culture to continue to dominate.
I think Korea, in terms of giving back to the world, to being a part of decision-making that leads to a better world, those kind of activities by the Korean government is what will allow Korean culture to be sustainable.
She also says there are many areas in which Korean culture is becoming popular, including food, fashion, and language.
I mean, it is it is sort of swerving and it's bubbling under the surface in so many different areas that I think it's just exciting to think about where the next big wave will come from.
배은지, 아리랑 뉴스.
Shifting gears, Washington has confirmed North Korea's military spy satellite did enter the orbit. However, it casts doubts over the regime's claims that the satellite took photos of key U.S. government and military facilities by saying there are plenty of images of the White House and the Pentagon online. Choi Min-jung reports.
The U.S. has downplayed North Korea's claims that its military spy satellite photographed key government and military facilities. Speaking to reporters on Tuesday, U.S. Department of Defense spokesperson Patrick Ryder said there are plenty of images of the White House and the Pentagon already available online. Ryder said he had no information to offer regarding the images allegedly taken by the North. His comments come as Pyongyang earlier this week said its spy satellite had taken images of the White House, the Pentagon, and other U.S. military facilities. The regime has yet to release the photos. The Pentagon did, however, confirm that the North satellite entered orbit, but refused to comment further.
We're aware that it did enter into orbit and that it involved ballistic missile technology, but beyond that, at this point, I'm not going to have any further details to provide.
Ryder also reiterated Washington's ironclad defense commitment to South Korea and vowed to maintain close consultation with Seoul and Tokyo to monitor related developments.
We will continue to stay in close consultation with our Republic of Korea and Japanese allies, as well as other regional partners and allies, and monitor that closely.
The U.S. also noted that it is continuing to closely monitor Pyongyang's restoration of guard posts and heavy weapons along the demilitarized zone. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Kim Myung-soo attended the 6th Indo-Pacific Security Forum on Wednesday. Military officials from 20 countries, including Japan, China, and India, gathered at the Multinational Security Forum online to discuss security challenges in the Indo-Pacific region. There, Kim labeled North Korea's recent launch of a military reconnaissance satellite as a blatant violation of UN Security Council resolutions. He also asserted Pyongyang's act poses a serious threat to the peace and stability on the Korean peninsula and called for international efforts to deter the North's evolving provocations. Other topics discussed included addressing cybersecurity threats and collaborating to enhance responses to climate change. Moving on to the OECD's latest economic outlook report. It expects a slowdown in growth for the global economy, predicting it to ease to 2.7% in 2024 from 2.9% this year. But it says South Korea's economy is likely to expand by 2.3% next year, an upward revision led by recovery in the country's exports. Our economic correspondent Shin Ha-young has the latest figures.
The OECD forecasts a slow recovery in the global economy until the first half of 2024 due to monetary tightening and weakening trade growth. Nevertheless, it expects more improvements in the second half as monetary policy gradually eases. According to its latest economic outlook report released on Wednesday, the OECD forecast growth of 2.7% next year, which is the same as its interim report in September. The world economy is expected to grow by 2.9% in 2023 before declining in 2024 and rebounding to 3% in 2025. This year's estimated growth has been revised from the previous projection of 3%. Factors supporting the world economy included a decline in global oil prices and a growing labor force. However, the OECD points out rising geopolitical tensions and the lingering effects of monetary tightening as downward factors. In particular, the Israel-Hamas war is expected to increase economic uncertainty, although the impact on the global economy is expected to be limited. Meanwhile, despite easing inflation rates due to monetary tightening and falling energy prices, core inflation rates remain relatively high. The OECD adjusted headline inflation for the G20 countries, raising this year's outlook by 0.2 percentage points to 6.2% and by 0.1 of a percentage point to 5.8% for next year. However, unless there are additional shocks, it expects most countries to return to their inflation targets by 2025. As for South Korea, the OECD has slashed its growth forecast this year from 1.5% to 1.4%. On the other hand, the estimated figure for next year has been revised up from 2.1% to 2.3%. It explains that South Korea's exports are set to pick up with a recovery in chip demand. But it notes elevated debt servicing burdens, the percentage of monthly household income that covers housing costs and any other debts, and inflation as factors that will continue to weigh on private consumption and investments in the short term. For South Korea's inflation, it has raised the estimates for this year to 3.6% and 2.7% for next year. The OECD mentioned that due to rapid population aging, spending pressures are set to increase by 5% of the GDP by 2040, adding fiscal consolidation as a key to meet this challenge. 신하영, Arirang News.
South Korea saw a surge in foreign visitors last month, reaching the highest number so far this year. According to the Korea Tourism Organization on Wednesday, over 1.2 million people visited South Korea in October, marking a year-on-year increase of nearly 160%. This is the fourth straight month that the country has surpassed 1 million visitors. The cumulative number from January to October has exceeded 8.8 million. As such, the government expects that it'll easily achieve its target of 10 million tourists this year. By region, the highest number of visitors in the first 10 months of the year came from Japan at 1.8 million, followed by China and the US. More concerning figures when it comes to South Korea's population crisis. The total fertility rate dropped to its lowest figure for any July to September period, and the number of newborn babies also saw the biggest drop for any September. Our Park Gun-woo explains.
South Korea's population is seeing a further decline. According to data released by Statistics Korea on Wednesday, the total fertility rate in the third quarter fell 0.1 to 0.7 children per woman, the lowest for any third quarter. Data also showed that there were nearly 10,000 more deaths than births in September. There were around 18,000 births that month, a drop of 14.6% compared to the same month the year before. The figure is the biggest percentage drop recorded both this year and for any September since data was first compiled in 1981. It was also the sharpest on-year decrease in about 3 years. As for the third quarter as a whole, the number of births hovered above the 56,000 line, a drop of around 12% on year, the lowest ever figure for any quarter 3. An official from Statistics Korea said a continued downward trend in the number of marriages has been a major factor behind falling birth figures. The number of marriages in September this year dropped 12% on year, once again recording a new low for any September since 1981. Divorces were also down about 8% compared to 2022. There were about 28,000 deaths in September, a slight decrease compared to the month and year before. Statistics Korea said they would investigate the specific reason the number of deaths dropped, as they usually surge comparatively at that time of year. Park Gun-woo, Arirang News.
In the Middle East, on the fifth day of an extended 6-day truce, there have been more hostage prisoner exchanges between Israel and Hamas. And there's talk about the possibility of yet another extension in ceasefire. Our Yi Seung-jae has the latest.
On the first day of the 2-day extended ceasefire on Tuesday, Hamas released 12 more hostages, including 10 Israelis and 2 Thai nationals. According to the International Committee of the Red Cross, it successfully facilitated the release and transfer of 12 hostages out of Gaza via the Rafah crossing with Egypt. In exchange, 30 Palestinians were released from Israeli prisons, including 15 women and 15 minors. According to Israeli media outlets including Haaretz and the Times of Israel on Tuesday, Israel and Hamas could potentially agree to extend the ceasefire by a further 2 days to December 2nd. The reports indicate that the two sides could agree to an extension under the same conditions as the existing deal. Israeli authorities have not confirmed the report, but said that they're reviewing the matter. And amid raised hopes of a continued pause in fighting, Israel reported clashes between its military and the Palestinian militant group. According to the Israel Defense Forces, troops were injured in an attack by Hamas in northern Gaza. The IDF said 3 explosives were detonated in 2 locations in the northern Gaza Strip, which constitutes a violation of the ceasefire agreement. However, Hamas countered that the IDF violated the ceasefire agreement first, adding that the clash was a response to a clear violation of the ceasefire agreement. Meanwhile, small quantities of fuel have arrived in northern Gaza. According to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs on Tuesday, other relief supplies supported by international organizations, including water, ready-to-eat food, and medical supplies, also began arriving in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. However, international relief organizations point out that the current supply of aid entering the Gaza Strip falls short of what is needed. 이승재, Arirang News.
In India, dozens of construction workers trapped in a collapsed tunnel were all successfully rescued after 17 days. Our Choi Soo-young explains how.
All 41 construction workers who were trapped in a collapsed mountain tunnel in northern India were rescued safely on Tuesday local time after more than 2 weeks. None of the men were injured.
I'm healthy and fine now. It is through your prayers and the hard work of the central and federal government that I was able to come out. Or else, I don't know what would have happened inside.
It's been 17 days since a section of a Salkiara tunnel in northern India's Uttarakhand state near the Himalayas collapsed about 200 meters from the entrance on November 12th, sealing it with debris. The tunnel construction is part of the $1.6 billion Char Dham highway development project, one of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's most ambitious projects, designed to link 4 Hindu pilgrimage destinations via an 890-kilometer network of roads. After the accident, a rescue team drilled a 15-centimeter wide hole through the rubble to insert a pipe to supply the workers with oxygen, medicine, food and water.
We faced difficulties for 15 to 20 hours with food and water. Then food was sent through a pipe. After almost 10 days, another pipe was inserted and we received food like dried fruits, pulses, chapatis. Whatever we got, we ate.
The Indian government initiated a rescue, drilling a hole to insert a pipe wide enough for a person to pass through, but failed to break through the final section to rescue the workers after its heavy equipment malfunctioned. However, the situation turned around because of the red miners who used hand drills inside the evacuation hole to push through the debris and insert the large pipe. After over 2 weeks, each of the workers was extracted one at a time through the 90 centimeters diameter pipe. Officials have not given a reason for the collapse, but the area is susceptible to landslide, earthquakes and floods. Choi Soo-young, Arirang News.
The 28th Annual United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change starts tomorrow in Dubai, the United Arab Emirates. South Korea's Ministry of Environment announced on Wednesday that a delegation led by Minister Han Hwa-jin will attend the conference, where participants will discuss ongoing efforts to attain the goals of the 2015 Paris Agreement. These aim to keep the global temperature rise below 1.5 degrees Celsius from pre-industrial levels, and Minister Han will detail South Korea's endeavors to achieve this. She'll also promote the carbon-free alliance proposed by President Yoon Suk-yeol during the UN General Assembly, which was officially launched last month. The conference will be held from November 30th until December 12th.
As the temperatures are expected to drop heavily overnight, the cold wave warning has been further expanded to Gyeonggi-do, Gangwon-do, and Gyeongsang-do provinces. We could be waking up to the coldest temperatures of the season tomorrow at -8 degrees. The wind chill will plunge to -13. Hats, gloves, scarves, anything that can keep you warm will be essential when heading out tomorrow morning. Snow is still in the forecast, concentrating around the west coast. Up to 5 centimeters of snow is in the forecast in the mountainous areas of the Jeollado provinces and Jeju Island, and 1 to 3 centimeters in the Chungcheongdo provinces. The snowfall will continue on the west coast until the day after tomorrow. Extra caution is necessary with icy roads. Morning temperatures in the most areas will be in the minus range. Seoul will start off at -8, Daejeon -6 degrees. As for the daily highs, Seoul will get up to 0, Daejeon and Gwangju 3 degrees. Frigid spells will continue to prevail for the remainder of the week, then gradually ease from daytime this Sunday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Well, that is all for this edition of Newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 10 p.m. with our AI headline news. Good night.